Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Apex Town Council. This is the January 15th meeting for 2019. For invocation time, I'd like to first read something to you and then ask you for a moment of silence. There is a small section of a Native American prayer written by Blue Turtle. Creator of all we are, all we have, all we shall be, I give to you my most humble gratitude. I thank you for life and all that pertains to life about me. I thank you for giving me the opportunity of life in this form so that I may walk among your wonders with knowledge and given the option to be considerate and to care. As we consider that in a moment of silence, I hope you will take a moment to reflect on the blessings and the good things that we have in this country, and also those things that cause us to be a unique and great nation. If you would, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Please join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody here. If this is your first time coming to a town council meeting, rest assured you're not alone, but we want to hear what you have to say tonight if you intend to speak. There are a couple of things that you need to be aware of if you intend to speak. First is there are sign-up sheets over here that you must sign in. If the sheet is full, then we will be drawing the line after 15 people. I'm sorry, so if you've gone past that number, won't be able to continue because we do have to conduct business tonight. The second thing is make sure you sign up on the correct sheet. There is public forum, which is separate from each of the public hearings. So if you're unsure that you signed on the correct one, feel free to go check. I don't mind if you get up and go look at it because we will be picking those up in just a couple of minutes here. The last thing is, if you intend to speak, there is a yellow sheet that was on the podium along with the agendas that gives you the guidelines for speaking in a public meeting. You need to be familiar with those so that you can do that with the utmost grace and so that we don't end up having to ask you to stop unnaturally or so that we don't remind you of some of those rules. So in that, with that said, I will proceed. I will ask everyone who's here, if you are not currently signing up, please do find a seat. We really don't want too many people standing around. It makes for a safety issue. So with that, I'll move into the agenda, and we have consent agenda. This is a time where we consider things that are generally considered to be non-controversial and things that are enacted with a single motion by the council. As always, if a council member wishes to remove an item and discuss it at a later time in the night, they certainly may do so. With that, I know of no consent items that need changing, so I'll ask if there is a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve. Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, consent is approved. We now go to the setting of the regular meeting agenda. I am not aware from the town manager or the town attorney that there are any changes to the regular meeting agenda. Do you know of any, sir?
No, sir.
All right. And with that, I'll just ask, is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, so we've set the meeting agenda. We now enter into public forum. If the town clerk can bring me the public forum. I want to make sure a couple of things. If you have signed up erroneously because you live in the same household, remember there's one per household. If you are representing multiple people, those people need to be here tonight in order to speak for longer than the designated 3 minutes. So with that, I will begin looking through the list here. The other thing is, if you intend to speak on a public hearing item, then we would not want you to do that during this public forum. So I see, if you don't mind, just a quick, Ms. Nelson, you wrote OMV. I assume this is related to a public hearing?
Corrected myself.
Okay, so can I mark you off of public forum and we'll bring you up here?
I've already.
Yeah, okay, got you. All right. All right. And likewise, and I don't see any others, but likewise, if
We have one more
for public forum, okay. Here, come right here. And while we're getting started, Mr. Manthe, let me go ahead and get you on your way up here. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to take the pen away.
You want to remind them about this thing?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So while we're getting set to start, Mr. Manthe, just hang tight 1 second.
Sure.
One of the things that we've listed on there that can be a fun thing is if someone says something you agree with, since there are so many people, rather than cheering or clapping, which pauses everybody from talking, is to use, I saw somebody do it, the American Deaf sign language that is for clapping, right? So let's do it for practice right now. There you go. So if you hear something you like tonight, if you do that, everybody can keep talking and listening, and we'll see that. All right, with that said, and I want to make sure the town clerk's ready on the timer. So, is there a problem? What, sorry, I'm sorry, we're trying to, what do you need? Public forum?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but you almost missed it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Are you ready? Okay. Mr. Manthe, you have the floor, and as always, watch the green, yellow.
So I have 9.
1 second. Let me have this for 1 second, please. I'll give it right back.
I did circle a yes.
Okay. So Mr. Manthe is representing Shepherd's Vineyard. Is that correct?
Yeah, a group of Shepherd's Vineyard, yes.
Okay. So everyone here who Mr. Manthe is speaking on behalf of, please raise your hand. Okay. All right. Mr. Manthe, you will receive the 9 minutes as allotted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Proceed.
So my name is Walter Manthe, and my wife and I live at 1000 Chimney Hill Drive in Shepherd's Vineyard. Lived there since June 1st, 1992, and thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. Last week I sent an email to the North Carolina DOT expressing serious concerns that I still have about the impact that the 64 improvement project will have on residents of Shepherd's Vineyard. And I copied all of you on that, you councilman, mayor. I want to thank you, Mr. Jensen, for personally your phone call in response to the email. And Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you very especially. You came over to my house on Friday and spent over 2 hours. To me, that's monumental, and I greatly appreciate that. I think we both agree that listening is perhaps the most important element in good communication and in good government. And tonight, I'm just here to ask that all of us can reach even a higher level of listening, and I'll explain. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, less than 8,000 people, and since the local traffic was light, it allowed us kids to be able to ride a bike anywhere in town, no problem. So as a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, I could ride to Little League practices, games, camps, other events, and I would be startled whenever a car came up behind me and honked before they went around me. I was riding the bike straight, I was riding where I was supposed to, so I just couldn't understand why they thought they needed a honk until I got my driver's license. And then I got behind the wheel, and then I understood. I understood why they might honk, because now the last thing you or I would ever want to do is bring harm to somebody. Unintentionally, but nonetheless harm. But I didn't understand that perspective until I put myself in that position and saw things from that perspective. All I'm asking is that you see what things look like from the perspective of a resident of Shepherd's Vineyard, and then make decisions based on that and fight for the safety and well-being of all Apex residents while doing no harm to us, who will be impacted the most by the proposed underpass at Shepherd's Vineyard Drive. 3 issues I want to talk about. 1, amputation. I have a good friend up in New York who had to have his right leg amputated at the knee. Obviously, he did everything, exhausting every possibility before making the final decision to cut. Shepherd's Vineyard Drive has been a part of our neighborhood's body since its birth in 1986. For many of us, as soon as a realtor turned onto Shepherd's Vineyard Drive for the first time, we fell in love with Shepherd's Vineyard. And when we bought a home there, that peaceful, slow-paced entrance to Shepherd's Vineyard from 64 to Old Raleigh, with the environmental beauty and ambiance of all the old-growth trees and landscaping, was a part of our home. And when I hear an elected official say, well, Shepherd's Vineyard Drive has always been an Apex collector street and technically not a part of Shepherd's Vineyard, this is what he's telling me. He's still clinging to his handlebars. I'm confident that when anyone takes the time to put themselves in our shoes, they'll understand why some of us are honking the horn so loudly, doing everything we can to keep a part of our neighborhood intact. For further perspective, whose HOA dues paid for the expensive Shepherd's Vineyard signs, both at Old Raleigh and at 64? What about the 484 residents of Shepherd's Vineyard who have been paying dues every quarter to cover the cost of maintaining and lighting those signs, or for the abundance of flowers that get planted around both signs twice a day? Who paid for the irrigation lines to be put in, for the water that runs through those lines? Who's been paying for the maintenance of all the trees and shrubs and pine straw areas in the entire median running from 64 to Old Raleigh for the past 32 years? Just put yourself behind the wheel and you'll see things a little differently. We're not your enemy. We just want you to understand why we feel like a part of us is being taken, amputated. And we have the responsibility to put ourselves in the shoes of other Apex citizens, folks that come up Old Raleigh Road and will access and have convenience and connectivity north of it. We get that, 100%. We want that, but at no harm. Second element is property values. I have no doubt that the gentleman on the Apex staff that presented at the last council meeting is a fine engineer, but he doesn't know real estate. Take a poll of realtors who do it for a living and who have no skin in the game. Every realtor that I've spoken to, there's no doubt that the stripping out of those beautiful old-growth trees in the median of Shepherd's Vineyard Drive and putting in of concrete retaining walls on both sides will do harm to our property values. And if it affects one section of Shepherd's Vineyard, it affects all. Third item, Chimney Hill Drive being used as a cut-through. I don't think any of you have lived on Chimney Hill Drive, have you? I do. We have since '92. We know what it's like when the high school kids drive through it, and they do drive through it. There's going to be 2,262 students at the new high school. They're all going to find out very quickly the shortcut to the eating areas up in the Kroger Center. I went up there the other day and talked to the owner of Michelangelo's. He said he can't wait for the new high school to open up because he misses the over 70 people that visit his restaurant at lunchtime from the high school. Add to that Jersey Mike's, add to that McDonald's, add to that China Chef, add to that Schlotsky's, the Mexican restaurant, the ice cream shop. All of these places that every student is going to figure out very quickly, they'll take a route that has no lights as opposed to one light. That is going to affect our neighborhood. That will affect the safety of our neighborhood. Plus, when they go to school and leave school, they will figure out how to get to the shortest route, the quickest, and they're going to use our neighborhood as a cut-through. Why subject residents to that risk? Who's going to pay for the speed bumps that will likely have to be put in to slow down cut-through traffic on Chimney Hill Drive? So, Mr. Mayor, you asked me to have specific asks. Here they are. Please reconsider the long, narrow underpass with fresh eyes. Take a fresh look as if you're a resident of Shepherd's Vineyard and see if your recommendations might change. Second, the entrance restoration. You explained to me, sir, about a take. You said that the term take is a legal term for what happens when the DOT comes in and determines they need all or part of a piece of property for roadway development. You said when a take is done, there is compensation given that is commensurate to the value of the take. If the underpass gets approved, Shepherd's Vineyard residents will end up paying a high price for the so-called progress. What is the town of Apex going to request that NCDOT gives back to Shepherd's Vineyard for that which they are taking away? If the underpass is approved, I'd say a sizable, high-quality brick entrance sign at the middle of the median and Chimney Hill Drive with matching brick walls at the outside corners would be a starter. and then an abundance of quality trees and shrubs lining both sides of Chimney Hill Drive up to the walking path that leads to the library should also be required. We'd ask that you fight for that, and if needed, help pay for it if DOT runs out of funds. Betterment funding, and this is a term that you all are familiar with, but betterment funding allows you to augment what is given into the project by DOT. I'm told that 1.5% of any project cost gets spent on landscaping. So approximately $1.8 million can buy a lot of trees and hedges. But I imagine Cary will be contributing a good amount to enhance their section of the project on 64 to ensure their meeting is fitting with being the number 5 place to live in the country. I'd ask that Apex commit a sizable amount of money fitting with being the number 1 place to live in the country. Let's not let Cary do the max while we sit back and do something mediocre. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manthe. Ed Purchase.
Good evening. My name is Ed Purchase, and I also live on Chimney Hill Drive. The town of Apex has for many years straddled that line of being close enough to Raleigh to indulge in the perks of city life, but tucked back enough that our neighborhoods are peaceful and our main street is franchise-free. People walk here, they bike here, they live here. To be clear, I understand connectivity. Regardless of the headaches the construction process would produce, I embrace the published plans to build overpasses with non-motorized pathways at Lower Duncan and Lake Pine so that folks can get to and from Apex High School and Apex Community Park safely. As a state employee who must often travel to Charlotte, I embrace the idea of making Highway 64 a viable alternative to I-40 and I-85. I am pragmatic enough to appreciate the town of Apex approving commercial growth and expansion along Highway 64 east of Salem Street. I mean, who doesn't love Costco and Five Guys? These are decisions that brought value not only to my family, but also tangible monetary value to my home. Perhaps this matters to you, perhaps it does not, but I used my VA loan to purchase my home, and what I will attest under oath is the nicest neighborhood in Apex, Shepherd's Vineyard. We fell in love with the quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and our proximity just across the street from the Ava Perry Public Library and the pool. We bought a fixer-upper. It was what we could afford, and we were willing to take on that challenge if it meant living in Shepherd's Vineyard. We filled that home with 3 boys, ages 7, 4.5, and 3. They love to run and play outside. Our backyard is the greenway and a stream, and we can see the pool from our back porch. In the 3 years that we have lived there, our home has increased in value 30%. But I fear that's all for naught. This tunnel boondoggle that you've all fast-tracked will be the end of that neighborhood in any traditional sense of the word. I hear that our mayor is making house calls. He's asking folks to please not call it a tunnel. That is more of a saddle or a cut. Those are natural. What you are doing is you are digging into an existing hole deep down. You're not creating rises on either side like a typical overpass, and you will be covering that with the equivalent of 10 lanes of pavement. That is a tunnel, I consider it to be. That tunnel is projected alone to cost taxpayers millions, and it stinks of being someone's little public works science experiment. It has no precedence in the state. There is no precedence of building such a monstrosity out of the main entrance of a residential neighborhood. And to then compound the issue, somebody thought it would be a great idea to close off Knollwood neighborhood entirely from Highway 64. So now those hardworking, tax-paying, voting inhabitants have only 2 ways out, and one of them runs right in front of my home. Did I mention that the only knock I have on my neighborhood, that there's no sidewalks or speed bumps? I know Mr. Manthe talked about that. And there's no way to prevent people from speeding through. And what about the kids that walk to Apex High every day? What about the kids that walk to the bus stop right in front of my home? What about their safety? People flying through there. What I can't get my head around is why this radical and expensive tunnel was not only considered, but apparently fast-tracked. It's obvious that no one in this table lives in Shepherd's Vineyard. I don't think you would have approved this if you did.
Joel Page, I think if I can read that right, or Ingrid, I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, we're on the block. We should be on
Okay.
the other.
A different public hearing?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Is this Harvey Richmond? Okay, Mr. Richmond?
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Harvey Richmond. I'm a relatively new resident of Apex, 200 Ivy Green Chase Court, up off of Green Level Road. But I'm here about the new business, the proposed resolution that will be considered tonight under new business. having the council and mayor hopefully endorse the Paris Climate Agreement. So by way of background, I'm a retired senior environmental analyst. I spent 31 years with the US EPA working on national air quality standards. I'm a volunteer leader with the Sierra Club group. Over the last 6 years, I've co-chaired the Conservation Committee, though I'm not here representing the group officially. Just by way of background, I spent much of my time dealing with educating people about climate change and the ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As someone trained in the field of environmental science, I have closely monitored the scientific community's growing consensus that climate change is both real and significantly impacted by human actions. I urge the Council to adopt the resolution put forth by Council Member Bill Jensen, putting Apex on record as supporting the goals of the Paris Agreement. I also encourage Apex to follow up the adoption of this resolution with concrete steps. Attached, I've sent an email to the Mayor and the Council this evening, is a report by the ICLEI on localizing the Paris Agreement, a guide for local government action in support of the U.S. nationally determined contribution, which lays out ways that local governments can do their share, both in terms of reducing greenhouse gases and preparing mitigation strategies to address climate change impacts. The vast majority of citizens in this state have recognized that climate change is real and poses significant threats to our quality of life. I hope the Apex Council will join other towns, cities, counties, and states in setting a goal to address climate change and then following up with concrete steps to reach that goal. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Charles Catlett, I guess, did I read that right? Yes. Okay.
Thank you, folks, for letting me speak tonight. What I'm up here is about the unfinished business of the courtyards on Holt. Myself and my sister, Dolores Davis, we own this land. And the reason why we're here is, we just want to talk to you about letting EPCON buy this land from us. Give you a little bit of background on us. We were both born here in Apex, at Dr. Pearson's office right up the street, his old office. We've lived on this place over 50 years, since I was about that tall. And my daddy's people was on this land over 100 years. And the reason why we want to sell is because, as you know, living in Wake County is getting very expensive if you have to pay property taxes. It's eating us alive. On the 29 acres, we're paying right at like $19,000 a year in taxes. And my house is not new, it's 30 years old. My mother died in August of bone cancer. And I'm up here trying to finish some business that she wanted finished before, she died. She actually called Wake County and asked them to reassess her land. She said, well, if it's too high, maybe you need to sell some land. And that's what we're trying to do here. To sell to these folks, it's the only retirement we're going to have. It's the only thing that I'll be able to give to my daughter or my grandson, to pass it down. My aunt and uncle moved down here to help with my mom like the last year or so of her life, and they had to do some very unpleasant things. You've watching somebody die of bone cancer. And I told them, I said, for what you've done for my mom, if we get this land sold, I'll make sure you got somewhere to live. And, in the Bible, in Proverbs 13:22, it says, a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And that's what I'm trying to do. I just wish y'all would put yourself in our shoes and just kind of look at this from our perspective. We're not rich. I've been working on cars for 42 years. I ain't got rich yet, and it don't look like I'm gonna do it. My sister and her husband, they're retired, fixed income. My aunt and uncle, they just live off Social Security. And I'm just trying to help my family. We're just trying to take care of what Mama wanted done. But if we can't sell this to EPCON, we got land we can't use, and we're going to be hit with property taxes we're not going to be able to pay long term.
All right, thank you, Mr. Catlett.
All right?
Harlan Shepherd?
Stafford.
I'm sorry, Stafford. Apologize.
Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you for your time and thanks for being here and for your service tonight. I'm Harlan Stafford. I live at 1108 Smokewood Drive with my wife, Mary Marks, also known as Miss Mary, for 20 years at the Apex Library. Some of you probably have kids that know her very well. When I moved to North Carolina in 1973, a recent graduate from Auburn University, I lived on Laura Duncan Road. It was a dirt road at the time. But I've enjoyed the benefits of living in Wake County, and I enjoy everything that goes on in Wake County, and I enjoy Apex. I drive from Apex to Raleigh to work every day, so I fully understand the deal with 64 and needing some improvements, no question about it. I can't speak as eloquently as I've heard at least two gentlemen tonight speak about the conditions that the improvements as currently proposed would impact the neighborhood, but I can tell you that I agree with those assessments and ask that you reconsider the prospect of the tunnel, or whatever you'd like to call it. I think it's a bad idea. It interrupts a really great neighborhood. As I mentioned before, I've lived in Wake County since 1973, the first 6 years in Apex, and have been back in Apex since I was fortunate enough to meet my wife 5 years ago. Enjoy living here. It's a great place to live, and ask your consideration for that. Also, as I read the plans, I'm not clear on whether or not there's any noise mitigation along the Knollwood Shepherd's Vineyard side of the 64 improvements. I'd like to see some strong consideration given to that if it's not already in place. And thirdly, earlier comment about closing off the Knollwood exit, I confess that I do leave Smokewood Drive and cut through Knollwood now to get on 64, take a right to get into Raleigh, because after the traffic light was installed at the corner of Old Raleigh Road and Old Raleigh Road, I guess, when you're coming out of Shepherd's Vineyard, it's now almost impossible to get out for a left turn during rush hour in the morning, so I'll come around. And that's okay, because I only got a couple more years I need to be working, so that's not a big issue for me, but there are still people that are working. And so I'd like for you to consider helping all the neighbors at Shepherd's Vineyard and Knollwood and others. There's been one circular I saw that talked about the impact that the tunnel will have, and the road project actually will have on the library. Let's do what we can to protect our library. Secondly, I think that tunnel is not just going to impact the library, or the whole entry-exit, ingress-egress of the library, but it's also going to invite all the traffic from across the Kroger, Costco, hundreds of thousands of new apartment units on the other side come that way every day, and it's going to cause cut-through. I want to thank you again for your time. I appreciate your time. I'm sincerely of the belief that you have our interest at heart, and I hope that you'll put those interests to work with the Department of Transportation, State of North Carolina, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Leslie White.
Forgive the shaky voice. I actually have handouts for each of you. Hello, my name is Leslie White. I live at 1772 Townhome Drive in the Scotts Mill neighborhood. I've been a resident of Apex since 2008, and I'm a proud business owner of an Apex company that employs over 30 individuals. I'm also, and most importantly, a single mom to two elementary school daughters, and it's on their behalf that I'm here tonight. I also have the support of 78 neighbors who signed a petition for me to move forward with this request. One of the reasons I chose to move to Scotts Mill was its walkable proximity to Scotts Ridge Elementary. I was encouraged last summer when I saw the sidewalk adjacent to the new Woodall subdivision. I used to be married to a civil engineer, so I understand that when a new subdivision goes in, usually it's the subdivision that pays for the sidewalk. We appreciate the sidewalk. It improved access for the Scotts Mill Green neighborhood to Scotts Ridge Trail, but it did not, however, help the reality of needing to play chicken with 45-mile-an-hour crossing of Apex Barbecue just to access that sidewalk. So right now, currently, I am taking my two small children across Apex Barbecue at morning and in the afternoon just to get them to the school. It also doesn't facilitate easy walking access to the neighborhood playground. Rather, my children and I, and all of the residents who have moved into that part of the green, now that we have townhomes in that area and the density has gone way up, We now have to cross Apex Barbecue 2 separate times in order to avoid that soft shoulder that hasn't been finished and yet was in the original design for the neighborhood. I've appealed directly to the town's planning department. They have provided very helpful backstory to this request. There were initiatives a few years ago. They did an exhaustive research with the neighbors that would be affected by a new sidewalk, and I believe, in my opinion, they listened to those neighbors. I am now one of those homeowners, and I love my neighbors, and I respect our combined desire to not have our tree buffer removed just to put in a sidewalk. That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is for the town of Apex to fund a curb and gutter project. Finish the sidewalk that will adjoin the sidewalk that was just created on Mary Magdalene. It's 0.15 miles. My kids and I drove it again today, just to make sure. And so from Mary Magdalene to Scotts Ridge Trail, there is no sidewalk. If you put in a sidewalk, please don't remove the tree or shrub buffer. That would negatively affect our sound protection from Apex Barbecue. Let's see, I think that's it. I love this town. I love my kids' school. I love my neighbors in Scotts Mill. The amount of support that I've received so far has solely been via an online petition, as well as I went to our HOA meeting, but I will go door to door. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Reed Davidson?
Thank you for hearing me tonight. My name's Reed Davidson. I'm 1756 Townhome Drive in the Scotts Mill neighborhood, the Green. And I wanted to come tonight with my wife, and we wanted to say that we don't want the sidewalk completion project on Townside Drive between Townside and Scotts Ridge on Apex Barbecue. We see the project as lowering our property values, increasing the noise and light pollution from the cars driving past. We have a really nice hedgerow out there. It's well maintained. It's you know, it gives us a lot of protection from cars driving past. It's part of why we like where we live. And if it was cut down, it would really negatively impact. Also, I don't see any benefit from installing a curb and gutter section. We have a lot of, there's a creek that runs in that area, and the curb and gutter will actually negatively impact the storm drain system and probably would need to be studied. So you got to think of all the impacts. I don't think sometimes people don't think about what it might do to the creeks if you put in curb and gutter. But and I just think overall it's not a great expenditure of the taxpayers' money, because there is a sidewalk across the street. There could be crosswalk options that could be done to connect that sidewalk to our neighborhood with pedestrian beacons and things like that that can make for safe roadway travel and crosswalks for a much less cost. But I'm not proposing that project. I really just want to say there's better options and no to the curb and gutter extension out there. We love living in Apex. We love our house. You know, the neighborhood's great, and there's a lot of sidewalk already around the neighborhoods. But I appreciate y'all hearing me tonight. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Davidson. With that, I'll close the public forum with a couple of thoughts. One on the sidewalk, since that was the most recent. Just for the town manager, I know he heard that. We also have planning here tonight. I'm sure they would be more than happy to take that into consideration along with other things. And we're about to go to a retreat, our annual retreat, so that certainly could be a topic of conversation with regards to connectivity. Also, how that ties in with 45 land use map and plan. I think it would be good for us to at least take a look at that. I want to make sure we look at the whole picture. And rolling back on 64 project, I'm sure everybody is aware by now that NCDOT owns the project. They own the highway. Sure, we can offer opinions and thoughts, but it is their project, and I hope that everyone who has a thought and opinion does go to the January 28th meeting that they're holding at St. Andrews. It is intended to be an information sharing session, and they want to politely hear and talk about options and concerns. I think you'll find, if you haven't interacted with them, they're very good. We've held several of them here on the third floor for other projects, such as 1010 and 55, and I've seen those sessions work very well, so I'm encouraged, and I hope everyone who has a voice that wants to help shape that, please do feed that back to the NCDOT. But as a reminder, Town of Apex is not voting on that project, so we are simply in casual communications with them on that. With that, I have closed the public forum, so we'll now move on into the regular public hearings portion of our meeting tonight, and I'll pause just a couple of seconds for those who wish to leave. If for no other reason, just to make sure everybody can still hear as we discuss. Thank you. No, sir. We're not on recess right now. I'm just letting people leave at the moment. 28th is what I understand. Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. And if there is a crowd, the last one, if you don't mind closing the door behind you, that'd be helpful. Thank you very much. Just to keep the noise down. All right. We now move to public hearing number 1. This is rezoning application 18CZ33, located off of Secluded Acres Road, and Shelley Mayo is presenting tonight.
Good evening.
Hi.
Let's see. Let's get the right presentation up here first. Here we go. Okay. As the mayor stated, this is located at 7800 Secluded Acres. It's roughly here on the northwestern side of the town's jurisdiction. It's located adjacent to the Preserve at White Oak Creek, which is a previously approved subdivision here on the west. Green Level Church Road is here. The property can be accessed by Secluded Acres Road and also has frontage along White Oak Creek Drive. The property is approximately 5.61 acres. It's currently zoned rural residential. The applicants are requesting a rezoning to low-density conditional zoning, which is in compliance with the 2030 land use map's designation of low-density residential. There are also no proposed changes on the 2045 draft land use map, so this is in compliance with that as well. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on October 29th. That neighborhood meeting report is attached to your staff report. As you can see, the site is the location of a single-family home with several outbuildings. It is mostly wooded around the perimeter with a cleared area in the center. The applicant's proposing six uses for this property. Those would be single-family, accessory apartment, utility minor, park active, park passive, and greenway. They've also proposed several conditions. If you look at page 2 on your staff report, conditions 5 through 12 are standard architectural conditions that we see fairly regularly on single-family residential rezonings. Numbers 1 through 4 are a little bit different and are more specific to this one, so I'll read those to you. Number 1 limits the maximum density to 2.9 dwelling units per acre. As you know, low density has a maximum of 3, so they are further reducing that as well. Number 2 is that the development shall provide a public greenway easement as reflected on the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan. Number 3 is that the development will extend a minor collector street from Salient Point to the eastern property boundary consistent with the recommendations of Advance Apex. Although you can't see it on the aerial here, the plans for Preserve at White Oak Creek actually extend up to this property line, and Salient Point connects right about here to White Oak Creek Drive, so that would come across here and then slightly curve up until it intersects with Greenmore over here to the east eventually. Now, the applicants would not be expected to construct this portion of it. That would be constructed if and when those particular properties ever redevelop. This would only be for their parcel at this time. And then number 4, the applicants are proposing a minimum of 1 residential dwelling in the development shall be constructed to include the installation of solar panels and a power system of at least 3 kilowatt capacity. The lot on which this home shall be located shall be identified on the major subdivision plan. All other single-family detached homes shall be pre-configured for conduit for solar energy system. Planning staff recommends approval of the rezoning. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The applicant is also here if you have any questions of them.
Great, thanks. Any questions for staff, for Ms. Mayo?
Can you speak to the secluded acres, how that looks on the long-term plan for that road? Is it meant to be there forever, or?
I actually do not have the specifics on that. My understanding is it is expected to remain. However, that could change depending on redevelopment in the area. Shannon, do you?
I can respond to that question.
Okay.
So we did work with the applicant to make sure that what they're proposing is consistent with the 2045 draft recommendations. We are showing a collector street that would go through this property and connect. I believe we're showing it across from Greenmore Path, so that would be the main connection. The existing secluded acres road is not, the portion that's kind of twisty, turny, is not shown as a collector street, so it's not actually identified as anything on our
What about the
plan.
straight part before that, like to the south, like at the edge of that little notch thing? Yeah, to the east, yeah.
Which part?
Like the part, that's a sharp curve, but before that, is that meant to be in the plan?
So essentially,
I guess
this
it's
portion right here,
Yeah, yeah.
before it curves down
Yeah.
across.
Well, it's all pretty curvy.
That, without double checking the map, that, I don't believe that that's shown as a collector or anything else on the plan. So it would be a residential street, not, we don't show those on our plan.
Yeah, I guess what I'm going to ask, do you guys see any value of having any walkability or anything in that little,
Sidewalks of any kind along it, is that what you mean?
to the south there, like on that little strip? Is that something you guys see as part of a walkability issue, do you think?
Generally speaking, that's not something that we would address with this particular part. That's generally something we would address in the subdivision plan. So this is what we would consider a flag lot, and this is their little pole, if you will. If I remember correctly, that's about 20 feet wide. So more than likely, this will develop with remaining parcels around it. The owners are rezoning now because they want to go ahead and indicate to potential developers that they would like to put their property up for sale. And they're trying to get ahead, kind of out ahead of the pack, if you will, for that. But I don't anticipate that there would be a sidewalk right through here unless there's a road built there. We don't generally require them separately. That's something that we would evaluate at subdivision plan, though, and make sure that all the possible and beneficial pedestrian connections are made.
Okay. And I have one more question. With the greenway easement, so sometimes we see the thing where if they build part of the greenway, that cost is offset or whatever. Is that part of this zoning? And
So that would come with the subdivision. They would, depending on the number of lots, they'd be required to go to the Parks and Recreation and Cultural Advisory Resources Advisory Commission. I think that's all the right words. And then that commission would give us a recommendation for building it or for fee in lieu. Sometimes if they pay fee in lieu and they also offer to build it, then they can get credits on their fees. But at this point, we haven't evaluated that. We just wanted to make sure that there was a condition in place so that we could, at the very least, get that easement that's on the Parks and Rec map.
Is there any fee in lieu on this property?
It hasn't gone to
gone to
the
that.
commission yet, and it won't until subdivision plan. The only rezonings that go to commission ahead of any kind of subdivision plan are planned unit developments.
Oh,
So this one just hasn't reached that stage yet.
could you describe an accessory apartment?
You might know them better as granny flats. So the idea is that you could have essentially a small apartment or a very small house in the back that can either be rented out or can be used to house children who are adults but aren't quite ready to move out on their own yet, elderly parents who might want to live in there, those kinds of situations. Frequently they're above, say, a detached garage. Sometimes it's a basement apartment. They can take a variety of different shapes and forms, but it's essentially the ability, it's an attempt to increase the amount of available, don't take this the wrong way, quote unquote, somewhat affordable housing in an area. We've seen several of them. Generally speaking, they're used as family, kind of extended family housing in Apex in general.
Shelley, we limit the square footage on those, don't we?
We do. I don't recall off the top of my head what that is. It's either 25% of the gross area or 1,000 square feet, but I don't recall the specifics, so don't quote me on that.
Thank you.
No other questions for Ms. Mayo? All right, thanks. Is the applicant here to speak on behalf of their project?
They are.
Or do they wish to? All right. And as he's approaching, please identify yourself and your address, and the town clerk will give you the appropriate 9 minutes, which we usually give to an applicant,
Sure.
if you need it.
Probably more like 90 seconds.
Okay, sure.
So I'm Jeff Morris, 7800 Secluded Acres Road. And so I'm the property owner. My wife Lindy's in the back row. So first of all, I just wanted to thank the town staff and everyone here tonight for taking this matter up. My wife and I, for better or worse, have embarked on this process kind of on our own. As Shelley alluded to, we don't have a buyer yet or a builder partner, but we're in the process of trying to find that right party. I just wanted to make sure I was present tonight to answer any questions you all may have. Several of the council members were kind enough to meet with me one-on-one over the last month, and I enjoyed those discussions. I thought those were very helpful and appreciated the advice that was rendered. Basically, we're doing this because we see it as the best usage of the property for our family's future. We've resolved to sell, and we just think this zoning and then hopeful subdivision ultimately would be our best route. So that's our motivation.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Morris. And if we have any questions, we'll follow up with you, if that's all right.
Sure.
All right. I'm going to listen if somebody has one right this moment. All right. We'll go to the public hearing then. All right. We'll open up the public hearing. And Ms. Nelson? I think this is the wrong one. Where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Sorry. Is your name sort of scratched out? It looks like it is. I can't tell. Okay. All right. Yeah, so there's no one else on here, so I'll close the public hearing then for this item. Refer the matter back to council for possible motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Morris, for coming out. We now go to public hearing number 2. This is for a future minor Collector Street for the thoroughfare and Collector Street plan map, and presenting is Shannon Cox.
Hello. So the proposed amendment to the transportation plan this evening is in the vicinity of NC 55, just south of the future Jesse Drive extension. This request is associated with the Trinity Apex planned unit development, which is an item on your agenda this evening. The request is to remove the future minor Collector Street shown extending from Jesse Drive here to the east-west major collector street that would go from 55 to Smith Road. The Trinity Apex PUD is proposing non-residential uses adjacent to 55. The Jesse Commons PUD, which has been approved just north of Trinity, also proposes non-residential uses adjacent to 55, and that was approved without this minor collector street. The concept plan for Jesse Commons shows 2 parking lot drive aisles, which could be extended to provide cross-access between these 2 projects. As you'll see when you consider Trinity PUD, they are proposing to provide cross-access through those aisles. In addition, there is a minor collector street on the plan in this location just east of this stream. Planning staff can recommend approval of the proposed amendment. The TRC also reviewed this request and no other departments noted concern. Finally, Planning Board unanimously recommended approval of the proposed amendment at their meeting last night, and I can try to answer any questions.
All right, questions?
So we're proposing removal of this because we've got other ways to address, inter-property access, is that correct?
Yeah, it's related to the proposed land use as well as what was approved with the Jesse Commons PUD. So with the connectivity that would be provided through that non-residential land use as well as the minor collector street, we feel comfortable that that's sufficient connectivity in this area.
So my understanding is that this property and the one to the north were okay with that removal, but can you speak to the properties to the south, how this may affect them, if any?
So we are not recommending removal of the minor collector street in this location. I know it's hard to see at that scale, but this change does not affect them directly.
That road to the south, they'll just turn left and get out. If they want to go to north 55, they'll go out that way. Is that
Correct.
the idea?
Yes.
In theory, they can go on Jesse through the Trinity development the other way?
Yes, and you will see a conceptual plan for their roadway network for that agenda item, but they do have a road that would come through here and connect up to Jesse.
Okay.
All right, thanks. I think that covers it from council. So what, is there an applicant that wishes to speak on this? The applicant? Mr. Barron, okay. If you don't mind, please identify yourself.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group, here on behalf of the applicants as well as the property owner, really just to voice our support for this recommended approval, and here to answer any questions you all might have, but I guess there's probably going to be more in the next agenda item. So,
all right, thank you. All right, I'll open the public hearing, seeing that there's no one signed up that left their name uncrossed out. I will close the public hearing, refer the matter back to council.
I'll make a motion.
All right, we got it. Is there a discussion? Yeah.
No, you got
I took it.
All right.
When 2 people make a motion, that's a motion and a second to me. Is there discussion? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. We now move to public hearing number 3. This is rezoning number 18CZ32, Old Mill Village, Lot 1 PUD amendment. And let's see, presenting is Shayla Mayo.
Hello again. All right, as the mayor stated, this is Old Mill Village Lot 1. We are going to go clear across town from where we were a minute ago, and even from down here, back up to just across the street from Town Hall. This is the corner parcel that's remaining to be developed for the Old Mill Village subdivision. As you can see, there's Vineyard Station Shopping Center here, Villages of Apex South at this corner, and the Town Hall and Community Center here. The current zoning for this is a planned unit development conditional zoning. This is being rezoned to planned unit development conditional zoning. And this does comply with the 2030 land use map as well as the 2045 land use map. I want to give you a little background to this. The parcel is approximately 2.82 acres. Just before we start, The applicant did conduct a neighborhood meeting on August 30th, and that meeting report is attached to your staff report. Just to give you the kind of the background of this property was last rezoned in 2007. When that was done, there were a number of uses that were added, most of which are still in this proposed rezoning. One of the big changes, though, is that this particular parcel had very, very specific layout sheets included with it. As I'm sure you're used to seeing by now, generally speaking, when a planned unit development is brought before council, the sheets that you see up here are very vague. They generally show approximate location of connections, driveways, streets, approximate utility locations, the location of buffers, those kinds of things. But it's a very general outline. It's to give you an idea of where things might go and to give us kind of a framework to work within when we're going through the actual subdivision process. It also helps us get some conditions ahead of time that we might have a harder time getting later at subdivision. When the 2007 subdivision or rezoning was approved, it had extremely detailed plans, major site plan subdivision level details. So essentially those sheets became a condition of the rezoning. In order to build anything on this lot that is not that did not follow those particular sheets, they had to rezone. Now they also decided to rezone because they have a potential buyer who wants to add the use daycare. But at the same time, we did not direct this rezoning specifically to apply only to the daycare. We wanted to make sure that if the daycare deal fell through, that they wouldn't have to come back for another rezoning to fix some of the other issues that we had. And they would have had to rezone this property, period, in order to even change the layout significantly. So it wasn't your standard process. It was much more detailed than we allow anymore, precisely because we don't want to tie them down before they've gotten to the actual layout phase and are actually ready to build. So this rezoning is a two-part. It's to get rid of some of those extremely detailed conditions. I mean, we're talking the location of parking. They had a landscaping plan, all the things you're used to seeing at subdivision and major site plan. It essentially was a major site plan, but those sheets were combined with the rezoning. So it made it much more difficult to develop this parcel as anything other than exactly what was shown. Now that said, the applicant is proposing a number of uses. And I will go over those in a minute. I also have a sheet here that lists a few changes to some errors and some that were found in the PUD, as well as some additional conditions that the applicant is proposing after hearing the residents' comments yesterday. This was after a lot of discussion on staff today. That one in So the changes in the uses for this particular application were to remove photo shop, shoe repair, and jewelry store from the 2007 rezoning. Those are just uses that we don't see very often anymore. And to add in several uses. These include printing and copying service, upholstery shop, daycare facility, drop-in or short-term daycare, government services, school, public or private, and live-work townhomes. On page 2 of your staff report, there are a number of architectural conditions for the possible residential uses on here. Numbers 4 through 13 are standard and are very consistent with our regular residential rezoning conditions. 1 through 3 are a little bit different and specific to this one. Number 1 is that live-work townhomes will consist of first floor non-residential with residential units above. Number 2, condominiums shall only be permitted on the second, third, and fourth floors of non-residential uses. Number 3, live-work townhomes will have 4 steps to the porch and a minimum height of 20 inches from the grade to finished floor. We move on to page 3 of your staff report. Again, most of these are architectural in nature and are fairly consistent with what you've seen in other non-residential rezonings. Number 6, I'll call out. It is that, I'm sorry. Nope, I apologize. That was a mistake on my part. I had it highlighted for no reason. This PUD proposes a reduction in the overall residential density. The UDO allows up to 14 units per acre for high-density residential. This particular rezoning is proposing 4.6 units per acre. That would be a maximum of 13 units total, regardless of the use, whether townhome, condominium, etc. The existing zoning allowed up to 12 units per acre, which would have been a maximum of 33 units. So this is a reduction in the terms of overall residential density.
What was the new density you said?
4.6 units per acre, or a maximum of 13 units. The PUD is also proposing a maximum non-residential area of 20,000 square feet. That is a reduction from the maximum 50,000 square feet in the old rezoning. The other proposed design controls that you see on page 3 of your staff report are consistent with the previous rezoning and consistent with the UDO. The applicants also offered the condition that all site lighting shall be dark sky compliant in order to try to combat some of the light pollution that we see around. The building setbacks are shown on the bottom of page 3. The applicant's also proposing that the buffers along North Mason Street and Old Raleigh Road shall be pedestrian-oriented streetscape buffers. There are a couple of conditions in this rezoning that staff specifically asked for that are very consistent with small town character. This particular parcel is not within the small town character overlay district, but it is immediately adjacent to it. And in order to provide that transition from the small town character district to, well, the areas outside of it, we asked the applicant to include a few conditions that are very consistent with that district, just to make that blend a little bit more smoothly, and they agreed to doing that. One of those is making sure that the buffers along the 2 main roads are pedestrian-oriented streetscape buffers. Now, what this means is that instead of it being a standard vegetated buffer that you're used to seeing, say in a more suburban context, it'll be more similar to what you see in downtown Apex. There will be trees and there will be some landscaping, but that will be more contained to large planters or smaller tree grate areas, that kind of thing. It'll primarily be wider sidewalks, benches, that kind of situation, to encourage people to walk that area and to keep walking to and from the different amenities in the area. The other buffers are shown on the top of page 2, or I'm sorry, page 4. There is an amendment in that document I just handed out to everyone. So the staff report currently says that the buffers along Sawcut and Old Mill Village Drive will be a 10-foot type D buffer. The applicants revised that to a 10-foot type A buffer along those roads. That's a fully opaque buffer. It'll be planted entirely with evergreens.
Could you point
That's
out
here
Sawcut?
and here.
That's Sawcut at the
Yep.
south area?
Sawcut does this kind of weird 90-degree angle thing right here. So that's in response to some of the concerns the residents voiced yesterday about a little bit, mostly about noise, but to some degree it's mostly to try to give a better definition and kind of contain the feel of a daycare in that area. That condition is not constrained only to a daycare development, though. That condition is for any use that happens to develop here. So they've agreed to do that. On-street parking is also going to be provided along North Mason Street, and that will be angled parking similar to what we have out here in front. I don't know exactly how many of those because we haven't gotten to that stage of the process yet. And then the applicant has agreed to limit parking between the building and the road to no more than one double-loaded bay of parking between the building and the primary street. And that primary street is to be determined, if more than one street abuts it, which this does, then the planning director will determine which one that is. That's another That language comes specifically from the small town character section in our ordinance. And again, that's just to make sure that there's not a sea of parking between the road and the actual building. It's to make sure that you feel more comfortable walking along that sidewalk, that it draws you in and makes it feel more like a walkable neighborhood type area. Old Mill Village will be served by Town of Apex water, sanitary, sewer, and electrical systems. That'll be finalized at site plan review. The applicant's also committed to providing a public art at the intersection of North Mason and Old Raleigh Road. The corner will also provide a pedestrian feature to promote neighborhood community. Under the UDO, this development wasn't required to attend the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission because of the low maximum number of residential units. If any residential units are constructed, then they will automatically pay fee in lieu for that amount. Proposed development is also in compliance with the Apex Transportation Plan. Planning staff recommends approval of the rezoning as submitted by the applicant. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Planning board heard this at their meeting last night, and they voted to recommend approval on a 6-to-1 basis. The one dissenting vote had concerns regarding traffic and that the development that was originally proposed would not be built here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The applicant is also here as well.
All right, questions for Ms. Mia?
I have one. In 2007, when this was rezoned, what was it? Just a process thing that maybe we weren't paying as close attention to? But how did it get locked up so tight the way it did?
It's exactly that. They submitted both parts together at the same time. What should have been a major site plan and a rezoning were submitted as one package, and they went together to town council in one vote. So they inadvertently made their major site plan a condition of their rezoning. And it was just something that we didn't realize wasn't intended to happen. It was just a snafu. So unfortunately, I wasn't here at the time, and the planner who was is no longer with the town, so I can't ask specific details, but that's what I've deduced from looking at the various applications and agendas.
So I had a follow-up about that. You describe it as kind of a mistake, a bug, but it could be a feature because it allowed the residents to see what was going on. And so, and you showed that, I was at the planning board last night. It was a long discussion, and you showed the picture of what was proposed. And do we know it's a mistake, or is it something that was meant to sell the rest of them, the units in that neighborhood?
To be honest, I'm not completely certain. It looks to me like it was probably an error, but it could have been done intentionally since the planner who handled it at the time is no longer here, and I don't have any notes from her regarding that. I can't answer that definitively.
Diane, do you have any feeling on that one? Right, I'm guessing you were around.
I suspect that this is what they had hoped to do. We do not recommend that folks do this type of detail planning at a PUD stage because of this project and other projects that basically have been unbuildable in multiple locations without a rezoning change. And the rezoning changes oftentimes are turned down because folks say, well, I saw exactly what I thought I was going to get. And the reality is they don't know until they have tenants or buyers what will work there. So we don't recommend this anymore. I think at the time there were multiple projects that were approved with basically too much detail. I don't think it was accidental, but I think it was inadvisable.
So you said there was multiple ones in Apex that at that time that were doing this sort of thing.
Yes.
Do you recall some of those other ones or what they were?
Sure. There's one called Town Center Commons where the Lidl wanted to go, and the other is Villages of Apex, a couple of locations that they've also not been able to rezone.
So Town Center Commons, where the Lidl wanted to go, is adjacent to Walgreens, if that helps.
And then the other one was where?
Villages of Apex, couple of in particular, the northern corner of this particular development on this side, the northeastern corner.
At the Peakway and Laura Duncan.
Thank you.
That still sit empty?
Mm-hmm.
All three of those? In court, two of those, including this one?
And this is actually, this would be the fourth, this particular one, I take it back, would be the fifth rezoning of this parcel, this proposal. The first one was in '04, it was for the entire subdivision, including this parcel. Then there was one in '05, again for the entire subdivision, one in '06 specifically for this parcel, the one in '07, which you see here, specifically for this parcel, and then finally this one. So this is the fifth rezoning of this, and it's been in its varying iterations.
With the old plan, so am I seeing the same kind of parking on Mason that is envisioned possibly for this rezoning?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, I can't guarantee that it would be done exactly like this, or that we would get that many spaces. We haven't gotten that far, but this is a good idea of what we're looking for.
Any other questions for Shelley or staff?
I have a question regarding traffic. We got the trip generation comparison letter. I'd kind of like to know how that's put together.
I am actually going to let our wonderful Russell Dalton speak to that because he's the expert.
All right.
So.
Good evening. We have a slide prepared here. This is the trip generation table from the letter that was received from the applicant. What it's showing here is that under the current zoning, highest and best use, which would include 38 units of multifamily, 10,800 square feet of retail, and 7,000 square feet of general office, the development generates about 1,650 total trips. If it was rezoned, it would allow approximately the same number of trips, or it would also allow, as an alternative, daycare facility. So they've compared here below a daycare center of the size that they currently envision here, and it's about 620 daily trips. So it's a significant reduction in traffic. So the zoning that's before you is essentially a comparison between, what we've got now, which is a higher amount of traffic, and what could be under the zoning, which is either that or significantly lower. A lot of the concerns presented at Planning Board were, concerning traffic congestion and parking and some of those issues. Based on this, in our considerations that we go through a staff review for site plans, we would see a net benefit or reduction in traffic going from the currently zoned uses to a daycare center. It's significantly less traffic on the roadways. There is a traffic study that was performed years ago for the PUD as a whole. So the infrastructure that's out there today was constructed based on that overall TIA. Now what's presented is potentially a rezoning to reduce the number of trips on this parcel. We would still require a traffic impact analysis, but we would require that at site plan. So once they come in and they do actually decide to move forward with the daycare, that's when we would evaluate it. If it wasn't a daycare, we would evaluate it at the higher number of trips, and that's how the TIA would be conducted.
So we heard a lot about traffic and parking yesterday, and that already exist. And what can you speak to? Was there just a underestimation of what people were going to do as far as parking and traffic through that neighborhood as it already is built out?
Can I answer that, please? So our UDO for years did not provide for adequate guest parking in townhome communities because people do not park in their garages. They were allowed to count the garages as parking spaces. A lot of people do not put cars in garages, they put stuff in garages. We worked with the police department to try to figure out how to better plan townhome developments because the ones that were done years ago don't work as well as they should. So townhome developments that have no garages work great. The ones that are just surface parking work great. Townhomes with 2-car garages work relatively well because there's 2 parking spots in the concrete pad in front of the garage. 1-car garages work particularly poorly for parking because typically there's no car in the garage and there's only 1 parking spot in the driveway, if the driveway is even long enough to park the vehicle. So we've changed the standards for how long the driveways have to be. We've changed the standards for how many guest parking spaces you need to have. And the newer communities have much more parking than the older communities.
So related to transportation, and I know it's just early, but still, do you have a vision for how people would access if this was a daycare, where it would cause less stress on the roads and less of a safety issue?
Yes, well, the proposed access we have in this exhibit, and this, the main entrance would be on Old Mill Village Drive at this location, halfway between Sawcut and Mason Street. So full movement would be served off of the intersection at Mason Street across from the community center. There's an existing through left and right turn lane exiting the site there. So this intersection would be full movement. They would also have anticipated direct access to Old Raleigh Road. So this would be anticipated to be a right-in, right-out access. There would likely be a deceleration right turn lane required at this location. So any traffic that wanted to go east on Old Raleigh Road or wanted to enter the site from the north or from the west could easily use this entrance rather than going to their other entrance. So that helps reduce the traffic load on the intersection that actually serves the entrance to the neighborhood.
And just as an interjection, I realized a moment ago when Amanda informed me that I actually neglected to review all of the new conditions that the applicant proposed today, and for that I apologize. Number one, they are proposing to remove the driveway connection to Sawcut Lane. We had multiple residents yesterday express their dismay about that, simply because there's an alley right here, and trying to come out of your alley and turn left or right when there's also a possible driveway here could be very confusing and difficult, especially if there's people parked along the side of the road there. Numbers 2 and 3 are to increase the buffers along Sawcut Lane and Old Mill Village Drive, as well as this buffer here to the east, from a type D to a 10-foot type A buffer, as I mentioned. Along Sawcut Lane and the property to the east, along Sawcut Lane, the applicant's also proposing a 6-foot tall privacy fence to be installed in addition to those evergreen plantings. Number 4 is the maximum parking spaces of 60. Maximum of 60 parking spaces would be allowed for the daycare use. The current UDO would allow a maximum of about 39, so adding this use increases the amount of parking they have available to them, which would limit the amount of spillover for events, for just general day in, day out purposes, which was another major concern of the residents last night. Number 5, all buildings and residences in the case of residences being constructed shall be pre-configured with conduit for a solar energy system. Number 6, if any residences are to be constructed, one residential dwelling shall be constructed to include solar panels and a power system of at least 3 kilowatt capacity. The lot on which this home is located shall be identified on the plat, which may be amended from time to time. And number 7, commercial buildings shall be constructed to include the installation of a 10 kilowatt solar photovoltaic system. So my apologies for not reading those out earlier.
Shelley, in the event residential is developed on this property, is there a condition or something that says it needs to be like what's already there?
There's architectural conditions that would make it consistent with what's already out there. It does not specifically require that they be the exact same architecture, but it does state in the PUD that it will have a continuation of the existing aesthetics throughout.
So, one more quick, I guess. The angled parking on Mason Street, will there be an access from that to the daycare? If it's fenced off, then it doesn't function.
So it wouldn't be fenced here.
I'm
The
sorry?
only area where the fence would be is here,
Yes,
and the only angled parking would be along this side.
yeah, and
So
there
we
will
would
be
make sure
access
that there
to
would be
get.
sidewalk connection between the two.
Okay.
They'd have to
So-
provide sidewalk along the angled parking, and internal sidewalk is required to be connected to the external sidewalk as well. It may
Okay.
not be a direct access, just depending on grades, but it might not be the shortest route, because we have to make ADA apply, but there will be a connection to it.
Yeah, it just seems like that might be used for drop-off also if it's easy enough access.
We anticipate that it probably will to some degree.
I'm late to the table.
No,
Thank you.
not at all.
Any other questions for staff? No? All right, I'll see if the applicant wishes to speak. Mr. Knosson, I presume?
You presume, correct?
All right, introduce yourself for the masses of everybody who wants to know who you are, sir.
I will. Thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, Peter Knosson, Jones Knosson Engineering, 221 North Salem Street here in Apex, representing the owner. First, I want to say thank you to Shelley and the rest of the staff. They've been great to work with through this whole process, and I do want to just reiterate that the owner is in agreement with the conditions that have been added and have been presented before you. I'm not going to go through the rezoning. Shelley was very thorough in that, but what I would like to speak to is the contract owner, and that being Primrose School. They currently have the property under contract. Obviously, it's pending approval of this rezoning to allow a daycare use. Just to give you a little history, brief history on their unfortunate circumstance, they're located at the intersection of Laura Duncan and Highway 64 with the unfortunate, as I said, circumstance to have to relocate. I'm sure most of you know that Highway 64 is being improved by NCDOT, and because of that, they are taking their property and forcing them to relocate. Old Mill Village Lot 1 is a good site for them. It's in close proximity to their existing location. Primrose School is locally owned. There's many teachers and workers there that are part of this community, and they currently serve over 100 families in their school. As I said, they are the contract owner, and we believe that the school is going to be a good neighbor. Speaking of which, we did have the neighborhood meeting, and there were comments yesterday, primarily related to two issues. One of them was parking, and I won't go into that because that was discussed a lot by Russell. But the other one was loss of retail. The original concept included retail, and we acknowledge that. We acknowledge that this is a change. We're not insensitive to many of the neighbors' wish to keep retail. The only thing that we can add is that retail is nearby. Retail is available within the Apex, villages of Apex. Right across the street, there is a building that has been approved right at the corner of Hunter Street and Laura Duncan that has retail, office, and residential. There's also another parcel in the village of Apex at the intersection of the Apex Peakway and Laura Duncan that is currently under contract. I'm not allowed to divulge anything while it's under contract, but I am aware of that. And of course, also you have the Food Lion Shopping Center and all the out parcels there. So there is opportunity for retail for the residents within close proximity and walking distance. So all is not lost with this rezoning. I am going to stop there. I know there are many folks that are going to speak on this, but I just want to close in summary and just say that we encourage the rezoning. We hope that it will be viewed as a positive and approved. I'll conclude with that, and if there's any questions you have of me, glad to answer them.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Knosson. Let me check and see if anyone has a question for you.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to ask if there's something that arises during the discussion here this evening, and we would need to ask you whether you would be agreeable to that in addition to what you've already laid out here today. Would you be agreeable to let us know that? Would you let us know that at least tonight?
I will. The owner is here, and
Okay.
We can make that kind of decision.
Yeah, if we need to give you a moment to confer, we'll
Sure.
we'll allow that. That'll be good. Okay, thanks.
Appreciate that.
Can you speak to the history, like the question I had about the planning staff about bug versus feature of that being a detailed development? Were you involved, or you know anything about the original development of this neighborhood and this parcel in particular?
I was not involved in the original concept of the development in Old Mill Village. The only thing I could speak to, you mentioned, is about the building itself. My understanding is that there are building code changes that would require that building to be redesigned. So essentially, you couldn't build the building as it was currently approved. So I've learned that through the owner himself. So, but I don't know all the history regarding why they master planned it as part of the rezoning. As that's been mentioned by Diane, that's typically a mistake, and it is. That's why you look at a blank palette, so to speak, of property and provide different types of uses that are allowed to be approved in a rezoning process. And then when it goes to the actual land planning stage and site plan, then you can get into the detail. Doing it up front, it's never a good idea.
I'll say I like the change from D buffers to A buffers. I think that's a tremendous asset here versus the old plan. The one question I had was there's a privacy fence along Sawcut, but can that be rounded up a little bit somewhat onto Old Mill Village Drive? It's along Sawcut, but I didn't see that it would turn and front the condominiums that are across the street. I mean, as a small addition, because there's a commitment to do an A buffer in that zone.
There is, yes.
Yeah, but could the privacy fence go up along behind that too? I mean, it's a small addition.
I would expect the owners of the Primrose School here, I would think that their facility is probably fenced in. How that's incorporated into the plan is probably more of land planning. I don't believe there would be opposition. You know, the entrances themselves shown on Old Mill Village, you know, that can vary. So there are some land planning issues that would have to be done in terms of where that fence would end and where the entrance would be.
Yeah, I noticed the line of sight situation in the triangles that you look at.
Right.
And things like that. But I just think if, to the extent possible, to run that privacy fence, we'll just give an extra buffer.
I agree.
For the people across the street. It's just, I mean, I think what's going on here with buffers and everything, I think is outstanding.
If you don't mind, I'll defer. They're going to discuss that, the owner, and
I think that'd be fine.
I'll get back to you.
While we're doing the public
I'll get back
hearing
to
or
you.
whatever, if you want
Right.
to confer, that'll be fine. We can come back to that before we're done.
Sure. Thank you.
Has there also been discussion about just limiting the entrance to one entrance to reduce any traffic going through Old Mill Village?
That can be considered. At this particular time, that's more of a land plan.
Right.
I don't want to limit just to one access point and limit their site plan. I think the hope was that it could be done off of just one entrance. But again, that's going to be something that's going to be considered then.
All right, thank you, Mr. Knosson.
Thank you.
So with that, I will make a couple of notes here. Looking at the sign-up list, I know many of you saw that the sheet was full when you got to it. I think what I will do, in order to give enough fair hearing, but also to make sure that we can resolve this in a reasonable time tonight, is I will go through the list with a couple of notes. One, the Stockmans, I know do you intend to speak? Okay. If you don't mind, if you could speak together since you're at one address, if you could either send one of you or share the mic during the 3 minutes, okay, that'd be helpful. The other is, since I see several people from Old Mill Village, I'll just real quickly ask the question, very optimistically, is there a chance that for all the people who live in Old Mill Village that oppose this, there is one speaker that can speak for 9 minutes on behalf of everyone who intends to speak? Did you elect a representative or anything like that? Optimistically, he asked. No?
Not that many.
All right. Oh, okay, well, I just wanted to ask the question. There's a full sheet here. So with that, I'm sorry. with that, let me continue planning here. So with that, what I will do is make sure, I think, counting the applicant, Mr. Rifkin, did you intend to speak or simply answer questions and help your client? You do? Okay. All right. I think if we give everybody a 3-minute slot, we could fit everybody in without running through to past their bedtimes. So with that, I will go straight to Lynette Cardillo or Cardillo. Cardillo. Okay. And if everyone, while she's coming up, if everybody can help me out, I'll try to get a couple names in the queue. So when one person's finishing, if you want to get ready to come on up, that'll help. Lori Kernini, sorry, would be next. Please state your name and address for the record and observe the 3-minute green, yellow, red lights.
Okay, so I do get 3 and not 9.
3.
Correct. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Hi, Lynette Cardillo. I'm at 534 Old Mill Village Drive. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I would like for the property near Old Mill Village to remain zoned for residential and commercial use only and not to be rezoned to include daycares. I had the opportunity to share most of my concerns last night with the planning board meeting. I primarily addressed noise and other miscellaneous disruptions that a daycare would bring to our community. The board had heard several concerns about parking and traffic. The issue will remain that daycares will provide a great influx of vehicles at drop-off and at pickup and during special programs. As Old Mill Village Drive is a public street, visitors are allowed to park there, and it is not the job of our HOA to police this, as suggested last night. Regardless of what goes into this lot, noise and traffic will be a concern. We specifically do not want daycare noise and traffic, regardless of how amazing the daycare is. In fact, my own children attend a great daycare. If we are to have the inevitable noise and traffic, we want the original plan for this space. We want store businesses on the first level and housing on the rest. We want the walkability that the town of Apex encourages. In fact, last night at the planning board meeting, Advance Apex, the 2045 plan, which you're all familiar with, was shared, which includes plans for an even more walkable community with sidewalks, trails, and making sure that there is a balance of mixed-use areas, which would create a more diversified town of Apex. This plan was approved. The third item on the agenda was the changing of a residential agricultural zone to a planned unit development conditional zoning. Towards the end of the presentation, the spokesperson for the developer referenced residences and a small commercial area to further promote the desired walkability of communities. This plan was approved. We want the amenities that further promote this walkability. We want the amenities that were originally planned and that sold us on buying a home within Old Mill Village. A daycare would only have the opportunity of serving a small amount of the existing population. Ultimately, we want the property to be developed as originally planned. However, within a 2/10-mile radius, we already have an established daycare and another daycare that is in the works that is going into the property near Food Lion. If rezoning is allowed and Primrose builds on this land, then that would make for 3 daycares within a 2/10-mile radius. The daycare amenity would certainly outnumber any other amenity near our community. With this, please give us something else to walk to. Last night, the planning board discussed if there was anything wrong with the actual plot of land since commercial developers have not built anything on it. Well, help us figure out this issue in order to diversify the amenities within our area. The amenities that we, as property taxpayers, purchased our homes for. This issue is not about whether or not a person supports Primrose. In fact, when you look around the room, we see their stickers. Out of the sticker wearers, are there any from Old Mill Village? The school parents will come and go, but we live there. Please support us.
Thank you, Ms. Cardillo. Lori Kearney, I'm sorry if I can't quite. Kimini? Okay, and then Carrie Stockman, you'll be next.
Okay. Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Lori Kimini. I'm one of the parents. I was one of the, I'd like to say, founding parents of Primrose. My daughter has been there since the first day that they opened. First of all, I'd like to say that Primrose of Apex, they do not have a choice in this matter. They were not given the choice to relocate their school, uproot their teachers, uproot their parents. This is being forced, and this is being forced due to all of us who have grown the town of Apex and other areas that is requiring the state of North Carolina to enhance our road system. I would like to speak on behalf of the Primrose children to fight for their school. Primrose, I believe as a parent, provides a higher level of education. I know firsthand with my daughter. Just on a personal note, Not only does Primrose provide a great level of education, as I'm sure these other schools that this gal just mentioned just a minute ago, but they take it a step further. My 4-year-old is currently wheelchair bound for 2 months, and this will be very short-lived, hopefully. But the school has gone out of their way, their teachers have gone out of their way, and it really shows their character and doing right by their community and the parents that choose this school. I can't speak to the other daycares in the area, but I can speak to this school. I understand about the parking situation, but as this gentleman has mentioned tonight, is going to be a benefit to the town of Apex if you are concerned about noise and traffic for your neighborhood. If we choose to go retail, again, you could have something that goes in that's open 24/7 or other hours.
I appreciate it if you'd address the council, not
Right.
the.
So I understand. I understand. I guess my ending point is, let's think about the teachers that this is affecting, the owners who've built a great school. And as a parent, I do hope that you will move forward and vote for the rezoning so that they can have their school back. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kimony. Carrie Stockman, and then it looks like Content True Love will be next. Content? All right, all right, Ms. Stockman.
Okay. I said I was going to keep it together tonight. This DOT project impacts so many of us, and so I heard that tonight, and I feel for everyone, especially people whose homes are impacted. I'm fortunate it's not my home. However, I don't know how many of you know how hard it was to build a school to begin with, because you all knew it was a bad piece of land, and we thought we could fix all those things, and we thought we did. And so when we found out in June that it was going to be taken over, I just cried, and I couldn't believe it. And I reached out to all of you, and I thought I was going to change it, and you very kindly let me know that that wasn't going to happen, but that you believed in us. We shifted gears really quickly, and I'm doing it my way this time, so I didn't go to Primrose. I went to the town, and I said, tell me where to build this, where is it? And then Eric is one of our parents, and when he heard about my letter, he approached me with this plot of land, and some things that were very important to me is that we need to do this quickly. We have until January of 2022, which seems long, but it's not. It takes about 16 to 18 months to build a school. And when we first started, it was just about my husband and me and our 5 children. It was 4 at the time, but now it's about 35 of my employees that count on my paycheck every 2 weeks. And it's about 171 families that we have in our school right now. And I've promised them all that there will be no gaps. Somehow I'm going to pull this off, and we are going to shut down on a Friday, and we're going to open on a Monday, and we're going to move, and we're going to make magic happen because we have to. It very quickly stopped being about us. So I'm going to skip all the reasons why Primrose is great. Some of the things that I heard last night is concerns about our events. If you have seen my school, it is probably the smallest parking lot in the town of Apex. You have to get creative, and so we did that. We used to try to sneak our cars over to the high school and walk over. Our events, we counted today, there are 6 total in a year. We have learned to stagger the days that they are, so families get to come on different days because my parking lot can't hold them. They're either at 10 or 3:30. Typically, they're only for children 2 and up, so I know people were concerned that it was 170 families. They're only outside from 9 to 11 and 3 to 5. It's a pretty small window that there's outside time. The other thing I heard, fire alarms. I pulled one today just to see if you could hear it. Stepping outside the building, you can't hear the alarm at all. When the doors in the infant class open to let 2 evacuation cribs out, as far as you can hear it is 1 row of parking, and you can hear it for 10 seconds. It takes 2-year-olds 5 seconds to get out, and it takes my 2 cribs 10 seconds. That's not going to be a distraction to the neighborhood. They will never hear that. And the fire trucks don't come unless we have a real problem, and then they should come. Am I almost out of time? Am I done? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Stockman. Content True Love, and then Beth Sy will follow.
Thank you. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Content Truelove, long-term resident of Wake County. Actually grew up at the was born at the original Rex Hospital. But, you know, people are like, oh, that Rex Hospital. No, there was one before that one. So I've been here that long. But to kind of get to the point at hand, you know, I'm a school business consultant for Primrose School Support Center. And we currently have over 375 schools across the United States. With that, my greatest title, though, is being a mom to boy-girl twins that are now 9 years old and are Primrose graduates, and I can attest to the great education that they receive by going to Primrose. At Primrose, though, we do strive to blend a balance of purposeful play and nurturing guidance using our nationally accredited curriculum that is accredited through Advanced Ed, which does many of the colleges, and also the curriculum done through Wake County Public Schools. With that curriculum, we want to inspire children to think creatively, with compassion, resourcefulness, and also in parts of our curriculum, as we did tonight, we say the pledge. We also use sign language in our daily routines in our younger classrooms so that children can learn to communicate faster. In part of the process with vetting for a Primrose franchise owner, we literally receive hundreds, typically about 300 applications a year to become a Primrose franchise owner. Of those applications, less than 10% are accepted. So to give you that is just a background to understand that Derek and Carrie were vetted very, very strongly, and it's a very, very rigorous process. It's not just like, oh, I want to open a daycare. You know, we are a private preschool premium brand, and that process has gone through very extensively. The Primrose School of Apex has shown a revenue stream of over $2 million last year, which obviously builds into the tax base and everything here in the community as well. The school currently employs 35 teachers, as you've heard, and also has 171 families that are reliant on their care every day. Recently, an outside research agency studying children's science performance showed an increase of 113% of Primrose preschool and pre-kindergarten students from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year, which speaks to our education program. Primrose School of Apex, under the guidance and ownership of Derek and Carrie Stockman, believe in being a service to the community and teaching these traits to children entrusted in their care. The school has partnered with WTVD and their 11 food drive, which has benefited the food banks, Peak Fest, Apex Night Out, and have also led initiatives globally as well. Derek and Carrie have committed themselves to this community and also have been voted by as Maggie Award winners, and then also Primrose has recognized them as Rising Star Award winners.
Thank you, Ms. Truelove. All right, Beth Sy, and then following will be Mike Chirico.
Good evening. I am Beth Sy, and I live at 418 Sawcut Lane. I want to speak tonight because I am opposed to adding the daycare and the civic to the rezoning. I'm not against progress. The lady just spoke about the noise and the sirens and all of that, and I'm sitting here thinking maybe I won't hear the fire alarm, but I hope I'm not hearing the violins playing on the deck of the Titanic. Because if I'm on the deck of the Titanic, I'm going down with the ship fighting, okay? I am a North Carolina resident, been here all my life. I was born and raised in the western part of the state, came here seeking a better life, and I have been an Apex resident for the last 25 years. I love to call it home. When I had a life change about 4 years ago, I went to Old Mill Village because I bought into the idea, and I saw the PUD, and I saw it, and I said, that's what I want. Okay. It was a big decision for me. And I bought it because, first of all, it was supposed to have mixed use. It had no playgrounds in the neighborhood. So I wouldn't be hearing playground traffic, right? I have two beautiful children. I raised my kids here. I work here. I call this place home. And while I'm sympathetic to their plight, I would ask you, what responsibility do you have to me and to the other people who already live in Old Mill Village. Like the other lady said, these people come and go, we make our home there. Okay? And we really would love to have what you promised. I am a math teacher by trade, and I had the awesome honor to win a national teaching award last year. And I went to Austin, Texas. And the keynote speaker there was this wonderful Vietnamese student. And he started a national campaign. And his keynote speech was about, because I said I would. And no matter how you vote this evening, I would love for you to go home and Google, because I said I would. Because his speech was about keeping promises. And that's all we're asking. Please keep your promise to us. Consider us when you're making this decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tsai. Mike Chirico, and then following will be Brad Kelly.
I'm Mike Chirico. I live at 543 Old Mill Village Drive. I also oppose Primrose, and timing-wise it's perfect. The lady before me mentioned a lot of great things that I tend to agree with. One of the big ones being is that I also bought into Old Mill Village with the planned mixed-use retail space in that lot. I also want to point out that on September 20th of 2016 or somewhere thereabouts, this same folks came in trying to rezone that lot at that time away from mixed-use retail because they were unable to sell the property or unable to find buyers for the property. My guess is that it's because of the price they're asking. They're trying to make too much money. Now all of a sudden they have a buyer willing to go in Primrose School, thus the change again to zoning for this property. In 2016, this council voted 4-0 that they wanted them to build what was on the original plan. I encourage you to do the same again this time. We bought that neighborhood for the reason of that lot partially. We don't need another daycare within 0.3 of a mile to the neighborhood. And all of the other issues identified that everybody else has spoken to are accurate. I thought there was going to be an actual traffic impact study. I don't know that what we saw was actually that. It excludes the fact that all of that traffic is segregated to the very first thing in the morning and very late in the evening, the same times that all of us are trying to go to and from work, and right off of Old Mill Village Drive, might I add. I'd also be curious if the developer has provided an impact study for property values and how a daycare in the neighborhood, again, a third in 0.3 of a mile, impacts the property value of those of us who bought within Old Mill Village. I'm also not sympathetic to their plight, but keep in mind also that the North Carolina DOT took that land for money. They are making profit from the fact that that land is being taken from them. I'm not sympathetic to their plight, but we have a right to have our neighborhood and have some say in what is built on that land. So thank you very much for the time. I don't want to repeat a lot of things everybody else said, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Karen Cleary. I'm sorry, Mr. Chirico. So Brad Kelly is next. Apologize. And then Karen Cleary, you'll be next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and town council members. My name is Brad Kelly, and I live in 309 Old Mill Village Drive. And my son goes to Primrose of Apex. And I've been there for 3 years. I love the community. The neighbors are great. I love that we're very close to downtown Apex. And we did a various search of what daycares to go to. We're new parents trying to figure things out. And Primrose Above and Beyond was the place to go. It was great that it was close by. We went and looked at other schools in various locations as well. And what really stood out was their focus on art, their focus in sign language, things that other daycares here don't have. And, you know, the community, I'm originally from upstate New York, so coming here, finding a family within that, have made friends and things in other areas, but to have that community within the school, really getting to know my son, who's now going to be 2 next month, and really just seeing him flourish. The staff really care for him. It's more than just teachers, it's more than just people with jobs. These people really love what they do. And I think as an Old Mill Village community member, right now we don't have a sidewalk, as we talked about on that North Mason side of things, and it's very dangerous with kids to try and cross over, even to over where we are now. So to have more of that walkability, as other neighbors have mentioned, I think it would really be helpful. And the other thing, I don't have all the stats around traffic or anything, but if we're talking about the original planned use, the traffic would be immensely more, and we'd also be talking nights and weekends. Whereas Primrose has very few events, which was mentioned previously, and I would not want to be in a community where I have people coming in every Saturday and Sunday constantly when most people are off work. For those that work, yes, it tends to be the times when you're leaving or coming home, but to have it 7 days a week and have 1,600 cars versus 600 cars 5 days a week, I mean, that to me seems incredibly dangerous. And on top of that, as cars come through our neighborhood today, they are going so fast that if we had something that was more of a daycare setting, that people would not cut through our streets anymore, because it is incredibly dangerous to walk around as you are a community member, walking your dog, walking your kid, whoever. They go through the roundabout and they fly if the roundabout wasn't even there 40 miles an hour trying to go around that thing. So I'm here tonight just to support Primrose. I understand my fellow community members' concerns, and I wasn't here in the beginning, but what I can say is that they're a great place. They really care about the community and the kids, and if they weren't here, I don't know where my family would be, so I really appreciate that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Karen Cleary. And one question as you're coming up, I saw you've also signed your mom in. Does she intend to speak?
Correct. She doesn't want to speak.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you for clarifying.
But I won't need the 6 minutes.
All right, no, that's not how it works anyway. So feel free, go ahead.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here, by the way. All right.
My name is Corinne Cleary, and I live at 607 Old Mill Village Drive, and I also represent my mom, who lives at 115 Grindstone Drive, right around the corner. First of all, thank you for allowing us to speak, and thank you for your service. Apex is amazing. My children attended Apex Elementary, Middle, and High School. I travel for work and pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to come back to Apex. I travel internationally as well, and this is definitely one of the best places to live, so you guys are doing a great job. Appreciate it. I also work in human resources, and we relocated a site from Duluth, Georgia to here, and the employees were thrilled. So it's not just those wonderful people who grew up here or those of us who relocate here, it's continuing as well, which is great. My concern actually is coming from a totally different angle. It's the very few living options without stairs for the elderly and disabled. When my mother, as I said, she's 82 years old, she walks everywhere. She actually purchased her townhome in 2007. And at the time, the developer had that full plan that we saw tonight available for us to see, and it had condominiums in there. Condominiums are apartments, if you will, that you purchase without stairs. I don't know how she does it, but her home actually has a 3-car garage, and she goes from the downstairs up to the main floor, upstairs, and up to the 3rd floor, technically, with the bedrooms sometimes quicker than I do, which is awesome, but I'm not sure how long she's going to be able to do it. And when I purchased my home about 3 years ago, and it was the same thing. I actually live on that side where you're proposing they put the barrier, which would be great. I would like to strongly encourage the board that when you go to your annual upcoming retreat, please review how to strongly encourage developers for housing for elderly and disabled. Don't segregate them into 55 and older. My mom doesn't want that. I don't either once I turn 55. Allow them to live amongst us, to walk to the wonderful amenities downtown facilities. My mom literally walks by my front door to go to the community center, to go to yoga, exercise classes, the senior classes, phenomenal programs. Keep the original plan for condos if possible. Definitely appreciate the seller's efforts to add more buffers and make it more amiable. And special thanks again to everyone. Sorry I went over.
No, you're good. Thank you, Ms. Cleary. And Ms. Sitzler, sounds like you've got a big fan over here, so congratulations. Thank you. At this time, let's see, Catherine Morgan. I'm sorry I didn't give you a heads up there. Is that right, Catherine Morgan?
Yes.
All right, come on up. We'll be followed by Lori Prister. All right, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I'm Catherine Morgan. I live at 420 Sawcut Lane. I moved here about 3.5 years ago from Kansas City, Missouri. When I had my real estate agent helping me, who was also from Apex, we looked at about 10 locations to live: Morrisville, Holly Springs, all townhomes. I chose Apex not only because I loved Apex, but because one of the big selling points was the live, work, play concept. I was going to read, I don't know that I have time to do that, from the website from the Villages of Apex, but when you read this, this is the concept I bought into, to live not just the downtown of Apex or the whole community, but things like quaint shops, stylish boutiques, cafes. This is on your the Villages of Apex website. Beautifully landscaped, the community walkability. That's what the original zoning said. It's what it appealed to me. That's what I wanted. That's what I bought into. So I'm opposed to the civic daycare school provision in the rezoning. You know, just to remind people, I know you all know this and everyone here, but it's live, work, play, new homes, luxury apartments, retail, and office space. That's what I thought I was giving. I chose to live in Old Mill Village. I'm not against and have nothing against the School of Primrose. In fact, my grandchildren attend the school of, that's the one, they did go to the one in Apex, they go to the one at Westlake. I'm really familiar with a lot of the school, and so I'm not challenging that. I just don't want that next to me. The other thing, and I don't have a site layout other than this, I spoke extensively last night about the overflow of traffic from the school, and the fact that our neighborhood relies heavily, not a little bit, heavily on street parking. We don't have enough parking. We have very short driveways. We cannot park. So residents, guests, if a repairman comes, they have to park on the street. I'm opposed adamantly to the entrances for any project that uses saw cut and Old Mill Village is the primary entrance. I did a lot of research, and I'm going to see the thing be really quick, on daycares that have overflow parking. They have many events. I could list a lot of them. I've been to 8 to 10 last year at the Primrose, and there was a huge problem. There's not enough on-site parking. I would like to see the town council and the city of Aket keep the promise to us for live, work, play environment.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan.
Okay, thank you.
Lori Prister, and then Barbara Collins, are you here? All right, Ms. Prister?
It's Feaster, but
I'm sorry. That's an F?
You're fine, it is.
Okay.
It's, I try to fit it in our name.
Oh, got it, I see. All right, proceed.
Okay, so thank you everyone for being here and for your service. I'm also a state employee, so I really appreciate you being here. But I also work in HR, and I want to say that the idea that there be 3 preschools within a short range of distance is not a problem, because in HR it is a very big deal, and where people are moving into this area, we have a large community of people who need to find daycare. So that's probably a false concern that I would address. And as a resident of the Village of Apex, I do understand disappointment. I do understand when they change the plans on you. So in that neighborhood, they did that to us multiple times. So my heart breaks. But more than the concerns that I heard that would be going on with this change, with the things that were going on in the first speak, I'm shocked that after the Shepherd's Vineyard issues, that these are the issues that are being brought up. I am here as a friend of Primrose, as I know the owners, and the heartbreak that goes into some of these changes that are being proposed for them. They didn't have a choice. They're dealing with disappointment as well. You know, I understand that, you know, as a homeowner, it can be disappointing, but as a business owner, as a former business owner, I understand that your empathy goes to everybody that you're employing and everybody that you're trying to serve. That's why you want to be a business owner. You don't just be the business owner for the aforementioned money that they might be getting to try to move that property and all the expense that would go into that. I wanted to address specifically the noises. I found some research to suggest about the fire alarm. A fire alarm goes off very briefly and the decibels that it goes. Actually, leaf blowers are at a higher decibel than an average fire alarm, and the fire alarm would be inside and the leaf blowers would be outside in the residential area. So that's all. I just wanted to share that I was a fan of the school and that I thought that this was something that should be seriously considered.
Thank you, Ms. Pfister. Barbara Collins. And then I'll go back. Is Kathy, is it X? All right, Ms. Collins.
Barbara Collins, 901 Norwood Lane, Apex. Most of you know me, and I have been on this subject before the council previously. I also know Peter and Eric, and I'm sure they know many of the things that I also have to say. I'm also a Primrose grandparent, so thank you for all the great work you've done with little Miss Charlotte. But I'm going to ask you to set aside Primrose because their business plan does not depend on being in that location. So I welcome you to Apex, and I would love for you to stay. We've had an excellent experience there, but it's not relevant to the business of this council, whether Primrose be in that location or not. So I encourage you to help us find a place for Primrose, but the business of the council is not finding a place for Primrose in that location. The business of the council is highest and best use, and I think I'm quoting something that was mentioned earlier. So I've been in Apex for 23 years, and I love it here. And I remind you every time I come to talk to you about this, that I am the one who stands up and says, put a giant parking lot in my backyard. Because we have been wanting retail in this space for a long time. I'm tired of this, you're tired of this, Peter's tired, everybody's tired of this. The only reason we are here today is because here is the adjacent land. Villages of Apex, vacant commercial. Old Mill Village townhomes, done. Every place that it says retail or commercial is vacant. So it's a failure of the developer to do his work, and it's a failure of the council to make him do it. And I'm tired of coming before you and wasting my time. I'm about to have my third grandchild in like 5 minutes, but I came anyway. Because you should, as many people have said tonight, continue with the agreement you have with our residents that we will have additional commercial space in that spot, period. So you are not obligated to do anything else other than encourage this developer to develop that land according to the vision. We are not obligated to rezone just because people ask us to and make a very excellent case for why Primrose, in fact, should stay in Apex. I'll remind you that my daughter lives in the Villages of Apex, which we love, basically my backyard with a giant parking lot, and my daughter-in-law is a teacher at Balcom. I have full respect for the city. I love being in the town of Apex, but I encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Is Kathy X here? East, I'm sorry. Everybody was in a hurry. All right, Miss East.
Hi, I live at 432 Sawcut, which backs up right to where this is going to go. My main concern is the amount of cars that already park on the street. I park in my garage, but everybody else parks on the street, or most people. So I'm just concerned that overflow for events. I'm also concerned about trying to get out in the morning to go to work or come home. We already have to go the wrong way down the street to get around cars that are parked on Sawcut, and it makes it very difficult and very dangerous to have a head-on collision. So if I'm a little bit further down, but I usually don't even have a place in front of my own home for my guests because the neighbors are parking or their guests. So if people start parking and overflow, it's just going to push everything even further down, and on both sides of the street, we already can't hardly drive down it to begin with. And just the fact of trying to get in and out during the peak time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. East. Terry Nelson, thank you for being patient.
I feel like I know you're ready.
I know, right? All right, you're up.
Good evening, council. Thank you for being such good stewards for us, and please continue to do that. My name is Terry Nelson. I'm at 509 Old Mill Village. As good stewards of this community, please do not make a hasty decision on our behalf. Okay. The planning meeting was only last evening, and many people are not able to attend 2 evenings back to back. Please don't rush. Your original plan was why we all purchased our beautiful homes in downtown Apex. The Halley Group and Apex First Development have built a beautiful town for all of us. Their website states, In recognizing the Triangle as one of the most desirable areas in which to live, Mr. Howley and founding member Mike Howington began purchasing small parcels of land at Apex and other areas. Howley and Howington established Apex First Development and Howley Building Group to manage their growing number of NC projects. They have been recognized for their stewardship and philanthropy in downtown Apex, and we thank them. The Villages of Apex is a beautiful community, and the promises made were marketed to each of us as we purchased our homes with this vision. Several planning members also mentioned last night that this property was tough to market. I called the realtor today to inquire about the listing, and when I spoke to Ms. Burchard of AI Carolantic, I was told there was never any listing, and I sent them a photograph of their sign on this property and received an email back from her explaining that yes, the sign was placed there, but it was not to advertise that particular property. It was 56 Hunter, which is owned by Apex First Development. This is very confusing. I would love to hear an explanation for that from somebody. Again, last night I witnessed a very teary, emotional, and long plea by the owners of Primrose, and we feel sympathy for them. But I would love to stand up here and cry to you too, because this is my life, and I've made changes, and I moved from a very faraway town called Cary and sold a great big house, and I knew I was coming to Old Mill Village because I'd scouted it out about 10 years ago. So please, stick with your plan, stick with the plan that you promised us. We have so much to bring to you. We love our downtown. My husband and I go downtown every week, at least 3 times a week. We know many of the shop owners. We love to spend our money there, but there's other places. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. And last but not least, Mr. Rifkin, you intend to speak, right? Yes. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Town Council, and staff for your excellent report. Just wanted to start by a show of hands. How many people are here to support the rezoning request today? Thank you. I will try and not repeat many of the comments you've heard. Firstly, the old plan that you saw that was approved in 2007, that was not buildable now because of building code changes. There have been 2 changes since then, which require better fire access, more stairs in the buildings. Those envelopes no longer work. Another point that wasn't harped on is that Primrose is only 3 years old and is now being forced to close, and if possible, given the limited time frame, to relocate. Just to reiterate, for traffic, we're reducing by adding Primrose to the site by 1,000 trips per day, which is a 62% reduction. In response to neighbor concerns, we have asked the council to approve up to 60 spaces for a daycare, and there will be on-street parking on Mason Street. In response to a previous comment, we will limit to 1 entrance for the site. We will not commit to where that entrance will be, but we will limit to 1 entrance only. Regarding the desire for mixed use in the Villages of Apex, the subject parcel has been owned and marketed by the current developer for almost 15 years. The reason that you got a response from NAI that they do not know what's going on with the site is puzzling, considering they are the ones who are collecting a commission on the site. So I don't understand that, and I'm sorry for the miscommunication. A multitude of marketing efforts, negotiations, and outreach have occurred over this period which have yielded no interest. The original concept of having mixed-use retail and office has never once been of interest to any end user for this site, owing to insufficient traffic counts, small parcel size, and lack of visibility from thoroughfares. Commercial uses already exist within the Villages of Apex, so the appeal of living near different uses will not be lost. We have a very strict requirement to meet 80,000 square feet minimum of non-residential uses, and we currently have a contract on the on the Peakway and Laura Duncan, the 8-acre parcel there, for retail use. We also have a contract for the future office building next to ours across the street from here, and the other site that is at the corner of Hunter Street and Laura Duncan was sold to a developer who's looking to do retail, office, and condominiums. Regarding effect on property values, I believe in your packets, the late edition I sent to you was that We have reports showing the property values surrounding the existing Primrose from before it was built and after. To share those numbers with everyone in the audience, the sales price before Primrose was built was an average of $262,324, and after Primrose's completion, they jumped to $291,014. That's an increase of 11%.
All right, Mr. Rifkin, I just want to let you know you're out of time there.
Wow, that was a quick 3 minutes.
But if there's
Can I ask a question?
hang on one second. Before we continue, I do recognize there is Mr. Knosson is technically the representative of the applicant, but you're also part of this. If it pleases the council, I'd like to give Mr. Rifkin another minute or two to finish his thoughts.
Okay.
All right.
I'll promise to skip the anecdote. Why this specific?
If it's funny.
Why this specific location? Primrose needs to stay near its current location in order to serve the same families and employees it currently does. Staying close helps families feel secure about their children's future and helps expecting parents feel more comfortable about where they plan to leave their child in the future. Primrose also works in territories, and this property is one of the few remaining ones within that territory. The personal anecdote is, for everyone who's called it a daycare, it really is an early education center. And the anecdote is, the other day, I told my daughter, she runs fast. And she replied to me, "No, Dad, I run super fast." And I said, "Where did you learn that?" She said, "School with friends." So it is not just daycare, it is early education. Regarding another comment from the council regarding the extension of the 6-foot-tall fence, we are willing to bring that along the portion of Old Mill Village Drive until it reached to a potential entrance there, opposite from those townhomes, which exist across the street from that. And lastly, we just appreciate the opportunity to bring this rezoning case before you. We ask you consider the objective facts regarding traffic and fulfillment of mixed use within the villages of Apex and the uncertain fate of this locally owned business, the families and employees, and this decision affects all of them. Thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions you might have.
All right. So, Mr. Knosson, if you don't mind being available with Mr. Rifkin for the question time, since this is applicant rebuttal, if you want to call it that, to see if council has any thoughts or questions for the applicant. At this time, I'll officially close the public hearing, as I think everybody got a fair shot at giving an opportunity to say something. So with that, I want to thank everybody, by the way, for being civil and taking your time and speaking clearly. So with that, let me see if there's anything from the app. Oh, you have something?
I actually just have one clarification that I just asked Mr. Rifkin.
Can you come a little closer so we can hear you?
Sorry. I just double-checked and clarified this with Mr. Rifkin. The condition to reduce to one driveway is only for the daycare use. If this rezoning is approved, any other uses would still have the two, the one off of Old Mill and the other one off of Old Raleigh Road.
Okay.
That is correct.
Yes.
I just needed you to confirm that audibly.
I'm sorry. So anything for applicant?
I have a question for Shelley then. It worries me to limit it to one. I think that's not a good commitment personally, because what if it's all on Old Mill Village Drive? Then that's going to be a heavier traffic situation, and the entrance from Old Raleigh Road is just right in and right out. So it's going to push the only entrance onto Old Mill Village Drive. So I don't want to see that commitment. I think we should keep it open for two.
Does Russell have an opinion on traffic flow?
I'm sure he does. I will let him answer.
Yep. In my opinion, for any commercial uses in there, regardless of what goes in, it's better to have 2 points of access, or at least have the option to do the 2 points of access. So I would agree with what Councilman Jensen just said.
So,
anything else from? Oh, you have.
So I assume that might well be withdrawn, the limiting it to one. Is that okay, Peter?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. I think what Eric is trying to do is be agreeable to what's been recommended. We will, in the interest, it is better planning to have two entrances. I'll agree to that. So we will remove that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Mr. Knosson, what's the size of their current site that they're on? Do you know off the top of your head what their current site is at Laura Duncan and 64?
Or does he have?
I personally do not.
I'm just curious. The land.
Land is 2.12 acres.
And this is Mr. Stockman. All right. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
For the record. Anything else, council? Okay. I don't see any more questions for the applicant. So at this time, I'll ask council if there is discussion leading to a possible motion.
I do have another question, I guess, for Mr. Knosson, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Of the current existing zoning on all the property that the owners own in that vicinity, with commercial use and daycare already allowed, what was your guys' thought on putting it at this location and having to rezone here versus using an already allowed spot that you have in the assemblage of property there?
Given the size that remains from the other parcels and the retail uses that are already going in there, there's not something large enough to fit a Primrose.
Already going in there, like already zoned to go in there, or the contracts you were speaking of earlier?
Zoned, and it's zoned for those uses, and we have contracts on those pieces. So what remains after all that's taken into consideration is not large enough to fit a Primrose.
Did you have a follow-up or you good?
How many parking spaces are at the current site?
36. And the existing site is 2.19 acres, or I'm sorry, 2.16 according to IMAPs.
2.16.
This one is 2.84, I think.
We'll do a plus minus.
Yeah.
How many, I'm sorry, we got
36
parking spaces,
spaces.
36, and the new one is
60.
60?
Would be a maximum of 60, yes.
Maximum of 60.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's not including the Mason Street parking spaces.
Okay.
So that was specifically left out of the maximum.
So the development of this particular spot will continue sidewalk that is not there currently, correct?
Correct.
It will add parking spaces along that street that are desperately needed anyway.
Correct.
Correct? I mean, the biggest concern that I'm hearing are twofold. That, first of all, traffic, and whatever we can do to make sure that traffic is not going through the middle of this this development. Obviously, the better. The other concern about not having retail, it looks like retail is being developed in the areas and parcels currently surrounding this area in the villages of Apex. So, just commenting, I don't have a specific question.
Okay.
Talking out loud.
That's all right. That's how we process sometimes. You good?
I'm good
All right.
right now.
Anything else from council members?
I'll just comment that, certainly there is a traffic problem, but it's really within Old Mill Village, it appears. Obviously, we don't have anything on this land right now, and there's a traffic problem. So I don't think that, I think that reducing the traffic loads, as per the Ramsey Kemp report, will be an asset to the community.
Yeah, I'm not convinced the daycare is going to cause a significant traffic like 33 units would if we leave the PUD as is. I'm with you on that.
And the other situation is there is retail going in locally, possibly even kitty corner across the street. I know there's activity there, although the prices might kill the development, as it probably did here. So I look across the street of Old Raleigh Road at Food Lion, and there's a number of out parcels there. And if retail could have worked easily, I would expect that those out parcels would have been developed into retail. So it's market driven is the problem, and we're relying on developers to come in based on the market driven. So we can't snap our fingers and make this happen. it's far bigger, I hate to say it, than we are. So.
I think, to that point, I think we have a great opportunity here to do something right for a local small business whose owners probably invested, I don't know, but probably a significant amount, if not a majority of their life savings to try to get this business and change career paths and start this business. Unfortunately, they built outside of the right-of-way at Laura Duncan in 64 with full understanding that something was coming. They didn't know what, but they thought they were outside the right-of-way, so it would work out. And DOT has come and said, oh, our right-of-way is bigger. I mean, some of my neighbors are losing half of their backyard, with the 64 expansion. And I mean, it's, I don't agree with it. But again, it's a DOT take, right? So we have an opportunity as a town to provide. I voted against previous changes to Villages of Apex PUD amendments, and I do not see myself, and I hope everybody's listening that's a part of this. I've seen 3 or 4 of them in the short time that I've been on the council, and if I'm fortunate enough to be up here longer, I don't see myself voting in favor of any other changes. However, I think this is a exception to that. I think if I was hard-nosed in one direction, I wouldn't be listening to everything that's going on in the public, and I think this is one of those exceptions that needs to be made for the town to do what's right to this business owner to move their business to this location. I don't think the traffic impact is going to be significant. We've seen the numbers, and I mean, a daycare is going to bring far less than a retail commercial center would. So I'm in favor of this. I'm glad that things have worked out the way they have, that they have found a like site not too far down the road. It's not our job to say no to a daycare because there's 3 other ones within 0.2 of a mile. If it doesn't work, the business will fail to go out of business. That's just how it works. So I'm not going to say no or yes to something just because there's more of them in a close, surrounding area. The market will take care of that. So I think this is a good addition. They're going to do a lot of improvements on this corner intersection, adding sidewalks, street side parking, which we all like to go downtown and park and walk. I think this will add that to that area. Again, not to keep beating this drum, but Hallie has promised something to the residents of this area, and I want to see you guys follow through on it. I voted no every previous rezoning that you guys have brought. I will vote in favor of this one, but this is an extreme circumstance that I feel like the town can do right by making this change for a local business owner who employs 35 people in town and does a lot in the community like a lot of the small businesses do. So I digress. Sorry.
You're good. You have the floor. Any other comments?
I'll go next. I mean, this is, to me, has been really troubling. I've thought a lot about this. I've read everything that was sent to me. I was there for the open house when the daycare was opened and was very impressed by, for example, having a physical education person there in a daycare, for example. But what's before me now is a rezoning. And what I've heard is I was leaning one way when I walked in, but as you should listen to everything. And I keep being reminded about the expectations that people have. And I know that, previously I voted to be consistent with what I have voted previously, or what expectations were laid out to people, or things that were policy that people thought. And so this council has also been moving more towards mixed use, trying to explain to people about moving services closer to residential on, the value of that, just like Publix Point, for example. So, again, this is very hard for me, but in thinking about, what people expected based on what they saw, and looking at a rezoning, not an excellent business. Tonight I'm not going to be able to support this rezoning for the reasons that the expectations of mixed use and what we've been talking about as a council, what it does for residential. So that's where I'm not happy, but that's where I am based on what's in front of me.
Any other thoughts?
I guess I'll go. I think that this use is less intense than what was proposed as far as the development. The issues with traffic, parking, I think, would be improved with this plan versus what you guys expected when you bought the homes. But I live in a neighborhood where we were surprised by a giant bridge in our backyards, and buying somewhere and expecting something and it being different, that to me is a deal breaker. So I think you guys would be great neighbors if you do go in. This is approved. It was nice meeting you, and I think you guys run a great preschool young educational system. Or what'd you say? Young? I forget now. Anyway, and I think you guys will be good neighbors, and I think the changes that were in this from last night are good ones. But I think you guys expected to buy homes with the mixed use, and honestly, I think mixed use is a good thing for that spot because it's near downtown. We want, I think, less density potentially out in the near Jordan Lake and out in the outside part of town, and more dense and more mixed with commercial in this part of town. And so I think the vision was actually appropriate when it was proposed in 2007. And you guys may get, I think there may be a rezoning eventually that passes, and it may not be what you want. I think that there's a risk there with this, but this one I don't intend to support.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on the motion?
If I may clarify?
Sure.
Is that with the conditions that are
Okay,
on
thank you,
sheet
yes.
6?
So,
Or the sheet that I-
referring the handout sheet.
And also including the addition that the privacy fence wrap around to Old Mill Village up to the entrance.
All right, so friendly amendment to make sure we include the
Just
conditions
checking.
as proposed plus the fence.
Yeah, so the fence, the clarity on the fence, the Old Mill Village side, is that going to stop at the last unit? Is that what the intention?
Based on what they said, it would wrap around the corner and then
the street,
stop wherever
the
the
new
entrance,
entrance.
wherever the driveway is.
So
And
I guess that's
more than
that's
likely-
a sketch, right? That's not a.
Yeah.
This is a rough location. We'd expect it to be a rough.
Potentially, the thing could go down this way. It could go to the.
Potentially, we expect it to be roughly there, but yes, it could be further down.
I guess so. My proposal, if you guys are okay with it, is to end it at the last unit. I think that would make more sense. I think that gets the intent. But
Is that enforceable if we were to word it? Is that something we could word it?
If you all make them set the driveway right now, you're going to be right back here with another rezoning, I'm afraid, because we can't say until there's a site plan exactly where that driveway is going to be.
can you extend it a distance? Can we say a privacy fence for? I don't know what that distance is.
So you would like it on the other side of the site drive? Because obviously you
No,
cannot
no.
fence off the site drive.
Right there.
No,
Yeah,
just-
where you are, Shelley.
I think they committed to do as much.
Already.
Probably what they're going to do is roughly in the middle. I don't anticipate seeing it way down here, just
I don't know
because
that
that's
we can do
really
what you're
close.
asking. I
think you need to wait for
Because
site
that's
plan.
very, very close to this intersection, and that would be a lot of conflicts. We would recommend the driveway be as close as possible to the middle of these two intersections. What I was saying though is I can't say whether it would be here, but maybe because of a curve, or here.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because the intent of the privacy fence is privacy.
I think aren't you doing a type A buffer there too?
There is going to be a type A buffer along the entire
Okay.
section.
Is it across the
Privacy fence
entire
would be on
section of
top
type
of
A?
it.
She just said that. Yeah.
All of Old Mill Village Drive would be a 10-foot type A buffer. The additional privacy fence would, as currently proposed by the applicant, would be up until the driveway.
So I think we need to stick with that wording because
Okay.
I think that's something that translates to site plan and also is enforceable by staff a little more clearly.
Okay.
Is that acceptable?
With these amendments?
Yep.
And you okay, second? Okay. So discussion on the motion for approval based on these. I personally will add, even though, I mean, I love Primrose, I love meeting you guys in your school, I think there's probably a better place for your business And I'm not trying to fight, and I don't vote tonight, but if I lived in that neighborhood with that, knowing what we would know about that, normally there may be just uses, but in this case, they had I think a reasonable expectation that there would be some type of mixed use coming there. And I feel troubled that this is not going to bring mixed use to that site, and it might even prolong that. But with that said, I understand the council has the vote. They need to weigh the options and consider.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you for having mixed use in there. I think one of the big problems, though, is the size of the property. It was hoped that you could put a true mixed use within 2.5 acres. And I think market-driven situation, once again, pushes the mixed use to be, if it's mixed use as a whole, to be on a larger piece of property.
Yeah,
I fully agree with you, though.
and I love market-driven solutions. I really do. I also know that we've had times where if we're patient, the growth is going to bring retail eventually, but maybe this is, I can't say whether this is ever going to work. I'm not a real estate developer. I did spend many years on the planning department, and it was, planning board, under the tutelage of Diane Ken at the time. But I really believe in my heart that if patience is allowed, that this will develop into retail on a first floor, some office space on a second, and some residential condos or something similar on a third, which then would support the businesses beneath and also complement the neighborhood that's there. I don't know how long it'll take, and I don't have the money to make it happen. So that's why it's a hard vote for all of us. Is there any other discussion before I call for the vote? All right, not hearing any more discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I heard 3. All opposed?
No.
I heard 2. So that passes 3-2 for approval. And with that, we will adjourn for break.